Neon Genesis Evangelion is quite the monster. There's really no other media franchise quite like it. I first watched the Evangelion anime years and years ago before I even started YouTube, and then after I'd started YouTube, I went ahead and read the manga. And that's been my entire interaction with it since. It has been a very long time since I first experienced the series. And with my upcoming Top 100 manga video this week, I wanted to revisit Evangelion to see, what I thought of it today. I wanted to go all out, because I have known for a while now that there is still a lot of Evangelion that I have not experienced, mainly the 5 theatrical films. So I reread the manga, then I decided to rewatch the anime and watch all the movies. And here we are today. This is not going to be structured like one of my normal reviews. I'm basically just going to be going through the franchise as I experienced it, give my thoughts on it. This isn't going to be one of those insane analytical dives into the themes and meanings behind Evangelion. Many of those exist before, and I don't know if I could do any better, so... But yeah, I still have a lot to say, so let's get into it. Evangelion is the story about a boy named Shinji.
Living in the flooded streets of New Orleans.
A junior high school student who lives in this semi-post-apocalyptic world. Right before he was born, there was this huge cataclysmic event known as the Second Impact. With it came the destruction of Antarctica, half of the world's population dying, and angels, these weird alien creatures who were here to cause some shit. At the start of the series, he gets recruited into NERV by Misato Katsuragi, an organization run by his father with the seeming purpose of destroying the angels. Angels are immune to most normal weapons, so to fight them, they have the Evangelions. There's a lot to say about what these things actually are, but for all intents and purposes, we're just going to say they're mechs. They get children to pilot the mechs. Why children? I don't actually know if they explain that, now that I think about it. And because their current Eva pilot, Rei, kind of sucks, it is now Shinji's turn to pilot it. He doesn't want to, they make him, and it sucks, because, piloting an Eva is not only physically damaging, but mentally as well. But after, taking out a few angels, he gets used to it, and he becomes closer with Rei, as well as Asuka, another child who joins NERV to help fight the angels in an Evangelion. That's about all I'm gonna say on the story. I know most of you already know it, but if you haven't experienced Evangelion yet, that's all I really think you need to know. I think this is really something best experienced blind, and this synopsis does have the benefit of being applicable to every iteration of the story we're about to talk about. So, chronologically, the manga of Evangelion was the first thing to release. However, it was not independently created like most manga. This was meant to be a companion piece of media to go along with the Evangelion anime that was in production and set to air the following year, with Yoshiyuki Sakamoto, the character designer for the anime, writing and illustrating the manga. However, we're not going to talk about that first, because while it was the first piece of Evangelion stuff that was published, just under 2 years later, the anime had come out and was over, while the manga took 19 years to complete. So we're going to go back to that, and we're first going to take a look at Neon Genesis Evangelion, directed by Hideaki Anno. Running with the synopsis I already gave you, this series follows Shinji and his friends as they work with NERV to help defeat these angel attackers. And about the first half of this series, maybe even more than the first half, is basically that. We're treated to, while it does have an overarching story, it is quite an episodic show, where pretty much every episode a new angel shows up, they need to come up with a new way to defeat it. Shinji bonds with his co-pilots, we learn more insights into their characters, and yeah, that's what most of this show is, and honestly, aside from the first few episodes, which I do think are really great, I think the series kind of loses a lot of steam during this middle section. We are still treated to a lot of good stuff, but a lot of what's happening kind of just feels like filler. Now, obviously not all of it is, and I don't think you should skip any parts of this series. But compared to how it started and compared to what comes later, I don't think there's anything particularly remarkable about the story in the first 14, 15 episodes of Evangelion. Which is kind of a weird thing to be saying, considering how extremely important this series was. I mean, it's hands down one of the most popular, influential, and acclaimed anime of all time. But I don't know, for me, up until a certain point, while I did enjoy pretty much all of the show, I wasn't all that invested in what was going on. However, things suddenly take quite a shift. Now, it's worth mentioning that at this point in time, Evangelion's production was kinda not going well. And what ends up happening in the final 10 or so episodes, they had to drastically change up the show in order to meet production deadlines. Anno, realizing that he wasn't going to be able to achieve his vision, his original vision, with the resources that they had, which makes it seem like everything's about to go to shit. But no, I think like the next good chunk of this series is phenomenal. The story becomes extremely interesting all of a sudden. A character that's already been introduced, Suzuhara. Once the spotlight is sent on him for a little bit and some developments happen, I think the story picks up its pace considerably. Along with the involvement of the character Kaji, I thought this series started to improve exponentially. It began to do a fantastic job exploring themes of grief, mental health. We really focus in on these characters and learn what makes them tick. There are also some crazy plot developments and twists going on. Big revelations about the nature of Nerve, the Evangelions, and some of our characters. And it all around led to an absolute blast. And all of this is greatly complemented by Anno's directing, which I think even in the parts of the series that I didn't care for that much, was pretty phenomenal. I loved his sense of direction so much. There are so many unique elements about Evangelion that set it apart from pretty much any anime I've ever seen before. The sense of pace, the use of colors, the music, pretty much everything was great. And for almost the entire series, the animation is extremely consistently great. So yeah, the story was going absolutely great. I was really, really loving it. And then we get to probably the most infamous thing in all of anime ever. The final 2 episodes of Evangelion. So at this point, the production of the series was... it became such a mess that instead of really continuing the story from episode 24, where like some crazy shit went down, we get 2 episodes of psychoanalysis on our characters. And, well... I can't say I hated them because they were interesting, but I kind of understand why so many people were pissed off by this ending. Because you had this story going and it was getting super, super good, and then it literally just stops, and then we just get a bunch of pondering the orb type shit. And by the way, the animation here completely... like, there's fucking still frames and reuse stuff. Like, at one point they switched to crayons, which may have been a creative choice, but it really feels like these episodes were just kind of jumbled together at the last minute. And yeah, while they were interesting, and there's a lot to analyze about these 2 episodes and its creator, Anno, as the conclusion to her story, it fell pretty flat. So looking at these 26 episodes as a whole, I thought it had some slow parts, but I also thought a good chunk of it was phenomenal. And then the ending left a lot to be desired for me. I'd give it a 7 out of 10, which may be controversially low because, you know, it's Evangelion. But yeah, that's where we are right now. And unfortunately, this ending did have a pretty big effect on Anno, and it resulted with him dealing with a lot of mental issues. Thankfully, though, he was able to push past it, and they were actually able to make a film conclusion to the series that picked up right where episode 24 left off.
You can't forget love and pride. Because of that, it's killing me inside.
Yes, only about a year after the series concluded, we got the end of Evangelion. One of the most significant and talked about anime films ever made. And there's a good reason for that. This is a fucking weird movie. Like I said, it does pick up where episode 24 left off. You cannot watch episode 25 and 26 and you really won't have missed a thing for this. And it just serves as the climax to all of this build-up that was happening in the final episodes of the show. And the first half of it is extremely exciting, giving us definitely the best action the series had seen up to this point. The stakes were extremely high, characters you love are dying left and right, and it's all around just some of the best Evangelion content out there. Except for the opening scene in the hospital. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. I don't care if it has meaning. It's fucking... No. No. Anyway, and then halfway through the movie, the credits roll. Like the full, 5 minutes of credits roll halfway through the movie. Then we get to the fucky shit. I really enjoy the second half of End of Evangelion. But I think how much you enjoy it will really depend on what you wanted to see. If you just wanted to see more robots fighting, you'll be disappointed. But if you're looking for more of that extremely great character dissection, all these themes about the nature of the world and shit, there's so much here to unpack. I don't speak German. The song is called Come Sweet Death, but in German. There's a whole sequence where they play that song, and it's probably my favorite moment in the entire franchise. Now I do think the very ending is a bit too bleak for my tastes. It wasn't a complete platinum end type deal, but it was just kind of is this really where you're gonna end it? What the fuck, man? But it definitely left an impact on myself and for the past 20 years on pop culture. It's been 25 years actually. Oh god. So yeah, overall I'd give this film an 8 out of 10. I think it serves as a great conclusion to the anime, and I do not know why I did not watch this originally. Anyway, so while all of this was going on, Sadamoto was still slowly picking away at the Evangelion manga, and it finally did conclude in 2013. Jesus Christ. So what is this manga? How does it compare to the show that technically didn't come before it, but pretty much all came before it? Well, like I said originally, this was meant to be a companion piece to the anime, and the start of this series and the start of the anime are pretty much one for one. However, as time passed, the anime wrapped up, as we discussed, ran into a lot of problems, and while the manga was still generally following the story of the anime, it was clear that it was slowly becoming something a little bit different. Now, I'll just be straight up with you. I think that this is the best iteration of Evangelion's story, and while I don't know how much of this Sadamoto himself was involved in, or if maybe Anno was giving him directions or whatever, but this really feels like what Anno's true vision would have been given they had more time with the original series. As a lot of the characters are fleshed out way more, there are a lot more story details. I'd honestly compare it to a novel getting adapted for the screen. The Evangelion anime has all the important parts from the manga, but it's leaving out so much extra great content. And I know that doesn't really work because the anime came mostly first, but you know what I mean. It also feels like Sadamoto, in retrospect, was able to go back to the original series and be like, okay, here are some scenes, here are some episodes that probably didn't have to be there. The one where, Asuka, blows up and Shinji gets a boner. So a lot of the more uninteresting episodes from the series just don't happen in the manga, because they don't really need to, because they're silly and dumb. Now, some specific examples of what I liked a lot more about the manga involve some characters I've already mentioned. Mr. Kaji, I really like his character in all of the franchise, but in the manga we get his backstory, and we don't get that anywhere else. And it's fucking awesome. And it adds so much more weight to everything that he does. Kaworu is another character. And there's a lot to say about this man, but I think the manga is really the only place where he feels fully realized to me. The anime introduces him so late into the game. He's really only in one episode. And, you know, for one episode, I do think they did a really good job of having him be impactful. But the manga introduces him a lot earlier. It gives him a lot more time to build up a relationship with Shinji. And while the outcome is the same as in the anime, I just felt a lot more in the manga. And once you get to the climax, it's almost the exact same as the end of Evangelion. Like, if you're familiar with that, you're not really going to be surprised what happens at the end of the manga. However, the very ending is completely different, and I have to say I did prefer it quite a lot more. It's definitely not as bleak as the anime, and, you know, there are elements that are, you know, tragic in their own way. I felt pretty satisfied with it, and I thought it was one of the better ways that the series could have wrapped up. So yeah, I really enjoyed the manga overall. Now, it does still take a while to get going like the anime did, because, like I said, it is very similar at the start. However, it does take considerably less time to get invested, because it cuts out a lot of the nonsense that I didn't really like about the anime. And yeah, overall, it's just great. The only, like, downside to this is you miss out on Anno's direction, but I think Sadamoto himself, the character designer doing the art for this, is really interesting, because there's pretty much no change in the art style at all, and the art for the most part looks absolutely fantastic here. I gave this a 9 originally. I think I'd drop it down to an 8, but I would still highly recommend it. And yeah, there we go. The manga wrapped up in 2013. It all got released in English eventually. Good shit. We're not done though. We just shot ourselves in front of a few things, okay? We gotta go back 20 years now. With the 21st century upon us, new technology became available, computer animation, fancy graphics. This is when Anno realized that his true vision had never been fully realized at all. Because with 90s technology, he couldn't show an Evangelion running across the elevated buildings of Tokyo 3. And thus, the rebuild of Evangelion was born. A retelling, a new iteration of this story that had at this point become very popular and iconic. And it was set to be released as 4 new films, offering a completely different take on Shinji's adventure.
Reboot it, renew it, reshoot it, redo it, and reuse it, retool it, abuse it, dispute it.
The first of these films, Evangelion 1.0, You Are Not Alone, that's this one, is almost entirely pointless. I have to stress, okay, I read the manga, watched the anime, and then watched the rebuilds back to back. So when I discovered that, like, 75% of the first rebuild film is the exact same as the anime, I completely checked out, man. Like, they wanted to retell Evangelion, which was all cool, but only after a certain point. Like, the setup is all still almost the exact same. There are still some subtle differences, but it was pretty much just a shot for shot, just reanimating the first few episodes of the show. And it looked nice. It was very pretty, these new HD graphics and all. But because of this, I was so bored. And it might be a completely different experience if you have not seen the start of Evangelion in a while. But where I just come off of it twice, things do get changed up quite a bit in the final act, and we do get some really exciting action, see some new things. So yeah, I'm feeling like a 6 on this one. It might have been higher, like I said, if I had been further removed from the start of the series, but it was decent, and yeah, the ending did get me excited for the next one.
Without Asuka from Germany, everybody would be lost. Her country is responsible for the hollow.
Evangelion 2.0, You Cannot Advance, is a banger. This is when I finally started to get the Eva rebuild. It was a retelling of the story, and there were still a lot of similar story beats in this film, but things take very drastic turns from the source material here. And it does feel like you're just watching Evangelion, but just a slightly different version of it, where, you know, characters are in different roles. There are things happening out of order that really surprised me, and we're just given a really fun, awesome action movie that still retains a lot of the, you know, character struggles and analysis that Evangelion was known for. Asuka and Shinji's relationship is really the focus of this one, and I think it was very, very good. And the ending was super shocking. It was not something I expected at all, only being halfway through the rebuilds. And yeah, overall, it was great. 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this one.
When I'm playing my piano.
Evangelion 3.0. You cannot redo. No, you cannot. I kind of thought I knew what was going to happen. Because, you know, up to this point, the rebuilds had been generally following the story to an extent. But 3 throws all that shit out the window. And it goes in an entirely different direction that I never expected at all. And it's honestly kind of lame, unfortunately. Not much really happens in this movie. There's a huge change in the status quo, but it feels so underdeveloped. There's like a lot we need to know that we don't, and at first it's fine, because Shinji's as in the dark as we are, but by the end of the movie, I still felt pretty in the dark as to what was actually going on. They introduce a bunch of new characters who don't get any time spent to develop them at all. There are like massive changes in certain characters we know that we also don't get much insight into. Kaoru is a big focus in this movie, and I do like it when he gets more development than he did in the original anime, but he just felt kind of bland in comparison, and they spend a lot of time just talking about the stars and playing the piano and shit. This movie was like an hour and a half and I was bored. The action was still great, but the whole thing just wasn't as engaging at all, and I was really worried for the 4th one because of it. Probably give this one a 5. Like, it wasn't completely worthless, but meh. So these 3 films were released in 2007, 2009, and 2012 respectively. A pretty consistent release schedule. And originally, the final film was going to be released simultaneously with 3, and later only a year after 3 in 2013. It came out in 2021. Yeah, so a combination of a whole bunch of production issues and Anno working on other projects, and then of course COVID, it really pushed this film back. I'm honestly really glad I waited to watch the rebuilds, because if 3 was the last one, like people had for 9 years, I would have been pretty rotted too. But finally last year, the world got Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, Thrice Upon a Time. And it's somehow, I don't know how, because the last movie was so mid, not only the best rebuild, but some of the best Evangelion content out there. It picks up right where 3 left off, but it once again takes us in a completely different direction that I wasn't expecting at all. While there are some, significant action sequences in this movie, there's a lot of just talking and characters interacting with each other. And it's kind of fantastic all around. They really fixed a lot of the issues in 3. They developed these characters more. We learn more about what's actually going on. And it all culminates in a climax where I actually felt like the stakes were high and I was really invested in the plights of these characters. All the films have this blend of 2D and CGI, and it was always really good. And here they have like the most CGI they had used up to this point, but I think it's all used pretty expertly, and the film just looks completely breathtaking. Oftentimes just the normal scenes of characters interacting look better than the action, and that's not to slight the action at all. The whole thing just looks beautiful. And I cannot believe that this is one of the longest animated films ever made, because it did not feel like it at all. This flew by, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought the ending was pretty great. It was more along the lines of the manga, and yeah, it was just, it was a really, really good send-off to the franchise, and I'm happy that not only do fans finally get to see this movie, but that it turned out so good. Fuck it, 9 out of 10. I wish Mari got more development, though. That's probably my main criticism with the rebuilds, honestly. She was in like 3 of them, and I don't know. I don't know. So those were my thoughts on the Evangelion franchise. Am I going to read the Shinji Ikari Raising Project? Fuck no. Overall, it's a franchise that I have a whole lot of respect for, and while I don't think it's perfect at all, I still, for the most part, really enjoyed my experience marathoning all of this shit. And I would definitely recommend it to fans of not only action series, but series where, you know, you're looking for a bit more depth in the characters and the themes. It's all here, and it's mostly all great. The original series and the End of Evangelion are on Netflix, the rebuilds are all on Amazon Prime, and you can pick up the manga from Viz Media in both the singles and the omnibus version. So, thank you all so much for watching. You can leave your thoughts on Evangelion, all things Eva related, in the comments down below. To my father, thank you. To my mother, goodbye. And to all the children, congratulations.
Shinji said, thanks, Daddy. Can I take it for a whirl and use it to help my friends save the world? Now come on, Shinji, let's get this party on. And King Alien, what in your Evangelion? Yo, Shinji, get in the robot. Your dad loves you, get in the robot.